Riley Carter sat on the edge of her lumpy mattress, staring at her phone screen through tired eyes. It was almost midnight, and she'd just gotten home from her third job of the day. Her feet ached, her back hurt, and she was so exhausted she could barely think straight. But sleep wasn't coming easy these days. How could it, when everything in her life felt like it was falling apart? She pulled up her messages and started typing to her best friend Jessica. At least she thought it was Jessica. Her friend had just changed her number last week, and Riley was pretty sure she'd saved it correctly. Right now, she just needed to vent to someone who would understand. "Jess, I don't know how much more I can take." She typed quickly, her thumbs moving fast across the screen. "I'm working 16 hours a day and I still can't make rent. Mom's hospital bills keep piling up and the insurance won't cover half of what she needs. I feel like I'm drowning and nobody even notices I'm going under." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she kept going, the words pouring out of her like water from a broken dam. "Mr. Patterson came by again today. Says if I don't have the rent by Friday, he's starting eviction." Friday? That's 3 days away and I'm still short $800. I've been eating ramen for 2 weeks straight because I can't afford anything else. Sometimes I wonder what the point of all this struggling is. I'm 24 years old and I feel like I'm 70. Riley wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. She wasn't usually the crying type, but tonight everything felt too heavy to carry alone. She waited for Jessica's response, expecting the usual heart emojis and supportive messages her friend always sent. Instead, the reply that came back was different. Simple. Thoughtful. "That sounds incredibly hard, but you're still standing, still fighting. That takes real strength." Riley blinked at the screen. Jessica never talked like that. Usually she was all exclamation points and "Girl, you got this" energy. This felt more serious, more real somehow. "I guess." Riley typed back. "Doesn't feel like strength. Feels like I'm just too stubborn to know when to give up." "Stubborn is underrated," came the response. "Most people quit the moment things get difficult. The fact that you're carrying this much and still moving forward says something about who you are." Despite everything, Riley felt a small smile tug at her lips. Maybe Jessica was growing up, getting more mature. They'd been friends since high school, but they didn't talk as deep as this very often. "Thanks," she wrote. "I needed to hear that. Work was brutal today. Had a customer yell at me for 10 minutes because his coffee was too hot. Like, sir, that's how coffee works." Then my manager acted like it was my fault. I just stood there and took it because I can't afford to lose this job. Why do we accept being treated poorly just because we need money? The response came quickly. "I've been thinking about that lately. The system is designed to keep people trapped." Riley sat up straighter. Okay, this was definitely not normal Jessica talk. Her friend barely paid attention to anything beyond celebrity gossip and makeup tutorials. But Riley found herself drawn into the conversation anyway. "Because bills don't care about dignity," she typed. "My mom needs her medication. My landlord needs his rent. The electric company needs their payment. And I'm just one person trying to hold it all together with 3 minimum wage jobs and hope." They texted back and forth for the next 2 hours. Riley talked about her dreams of going back to school, of becoming a nurse like she'd always wanted before her dad died and everything fell apart. She talked about her mom's illness, how watching her mother struggle broke her heart every single day. She talked about feeling invisible, like she could disappear tomorrow and the world would just keep spinning without noticing she was gone. The person on the other end listened, really listened. They asked questions that made Riley think. They shared observations about life and struggle that felt wise beyond Jessica's usual cheerful optimism. At one point, Riley almost asked if her friend was okay, if something had changed, but she was too tired and too grateful for the support to question it. "You know what scares me most?" Riley typed as the clock crept past 2 in the morning. "That this is it. That I'll work myself to death just to barely survive and I'll never actually live. I'll never travel anywhere or fall in love or do something that matters. I'll just exist until I don't anymore." The response took a little longer this time. "That won't be your story. I don't know how I know that, but I do. You have something rare, something that can't be taught. You have compassion even when the world has given you every reason to be bitter. You have hope even when everything looks hopeless. Those qualities will take you further than you think." Riley felt tears sliding down her cheeks again, but this time they felt different. Lighter somehow. "Thank you for listening to me ramble," she wrote. "I know it's late and I probably sound like a mess. I just needed someone to hear me tonight. Anytime. came the simple reply. Riley finally crawled under her thin blanket, feeling a little less alone than she had in months. She fell asleep with her phone on the pillow next to her, a small smile still on her face. The next morning came too soon. Riley's alarm went off at 6, jolting her awake for her shift at the diner. She grabbed her phone and saw 3 missed calls from Jessica. Confused, she called back while pulling on her work uniform. "Riley, oh my God, I've been trying to reach you." Jessica's voice came through loud and panicked. "My phone died yesterday and I couldn't find my charger anywhere. Did you need something? Are you okay?" Riley's stomach dropped. "Wait, your phone was dead? All night?" "Yeah, I just got it charged." "Why? What's wrong?" Riley pulled up her messages from last night, her hands starting to shake. She looked at the number at the top of the conversation. It was 1 digit off from Jessica's saved contact. 1 single digit. "Oh no," Riley whispered. Oh no, no, no. She'd been pouring her heart out to a complete stranger. Some random person had heard all her problems, all her fears, all her private struggles. Riley felt her face burn with embarrassment. How could she have been so stupid? How could she not have noticed? With trembling fingers, she typed out a message to the unknown number. "I am so sorry. I thought I was texting my friend. I didn't mean to dump all my problems on a stranger. Please just forget everything I said. I'm mortified. Again, I'm really sorry for bothering you." She hit send and immediately wanted to throw her phone across the room. Instead, she had to get ready for work, even though she wanted to hide under her blanket and never come out. The response came as she was brushing her teeth. "No apology needed. Good luck with everything." Riley stared at those words for a long moment. The stranger could have been cruel. Could have mocked her. Could have ignored her completely. Instead, they'd spent hours talking to her, encouraging her, making her feel heard. She saved the number in her phone under kind stranger and tried to push the whole embarrassing situation out of her mind. She had tables to wait and bills to worry about. She didn't have time to think about mysterious midnight conversations with people she'd never meet. If only she'd known that everything in her life was about to change because of that one wrong number, that the stranger on the other end wasn't just anyone, and that this wouldn't be the last time she heard from them. But that morning, rushing to catch the bus to work, Riley Carter had no idea that her biggest mistake was about to become her greatest blessing. A week passed since Riley's embarrassing text mistake, and she had almost managed to stop cringing about it. Almost. Every time she thought about sharing all her private struggles with a random stranger, her cheeks would burn. But life didn't give her much time to dwell on it. She was too busy trying to survive. She was wiping down tables at the diner when her manager, Tom, called her into his tiny office. Riley's heart sank. This was it. He was probably going to cut her hours or lecture her about something. Good news never came from being called into the office. "Riley." "Sit down," Tom said, and his tone was surprisingly gentle. She sat, gripping the edge of the chair, preparing for the worst. "I've been watching you work these past few months," Tom continued. "You're reliable. You're good with customers even when they're difficult, and you've never missed a shift. How would you feel about becoming assistant manager?" Riley's mouth fell open. What?" "It comes with a salary instead of hourly wages. About double what you're making now. You'd have some scheduling responsibilities and help with ordering supplies, but I think you can handle it." Tom smiled, something he rarely did. "What do you say?" Riley wanted to cry, laugh, and pinch herself all at once. Yes, absolutely, thank you so much." She practically floated through the rest of her shift. Double her current pay meant she could finally breathe a little. Maybe even cut back to 2 jobs instead of 3. It felt like a miracle, the kind she'd stopped believing in. But that was just the beginning. 2 days later, Riley was visiting her mother at the hospital when a nurse pulled her aside. "Miss Carter, we need to speak with you about your mother's account." Riley's brief happiness evaporated. Here it comes, she thought. More bills she couldn't pay. "We received an anonymous donation that covers all of your mother's outstanding medical bills," the nurse said, smiling warmly. "Everything's been paid in full." Riley grabbed the wall for support. "What? That's not possible. There must be some mistake." "No mistake. A private donor made a substantial contribution to the hospital and specified that it should go toward patients with financial hardship. Your mother was selected as one of the recipients." Riley's mother, Linda, squeezed her daughter's hand from the hospital bed. "Baby, did you hear that? We can breathe now." Riley nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Someone, somewhere, had given them a lifeline. She didn't know who or why, but she felt grateful beyond words. The surprises kept coming. When Riley got home that evening, she found her landlord, Mr. Patterson, waiting by her apartment door. She braced herself for another threat about eviction. "Miss Carter," he said, and he actually looked pleased. "I've had a change of heart about your situation. A business opportunity came my way, and I'm in a generous mood. I'm reducing your rent by 30% effective immediately." Riley just stared at him. Mr. Patterson, who'd been threatening to throw her out just days ago, was now cutting her rent. "I don't understand," she managed to say. "Let's just say things are looking up for both of us," he replied, actually smiling. "Get some rest. You look exhausted." That night, Riley lay in bed trying to make sense of everything. 3 impossibly good things in 1 week? It didn't feel real. She pulled out her phone and did something she'd been avoiding. She looked up that mysterious number she'd texted by mistake. She reverse searched it online, and her blood ran cold when she found the answer. The number belonged to a corporate line at Hunt Industries, one of the biggest companies in the city, and the CEO was someone named Alexander Hunt, a billionaire known for being ruthless in business. Riley's hands shook as she dug deeper. She found articles about Hunt Industries' investment portfolio, about their charitable foundations, about shell companies they used for various business dealings. And then she found it. A pattern. Her promotion at the diner? The restaurant was in a building owned by a company that had just received a massive investment from Hunt Industries. Her mother's hospital? It had recently partnered with a foundation that traced back to the same source. Her landlord's sudden generosity? His building was being considered for a development project backed by Hunt-related funds. Every single good thing that had happened to her this week connected back to Alexander Hunt. Riley felt her surprise turn to anger. She didn't want pity. She didn't want some rich man playing games with her life because she'd accidentally sent him some sad texts. She'd shared her struggles in confidence, thinking she was talking to a friend. Now that vulnerability had been turned into charity, and she felt humiliated all over again. Before she could talk herself out of it, Riley grabbed her jacket and headed out. She took the bus downtown to the gleaming Hunt Industries tower, her determination growing with every passing mile. By the time she reached the massive glass building, she was furious. The security guard at the front desk looked her up and down, taking in her worn jeans and faded jacket. "Can I help you?" "I need to see Alexander Hunt," Riley said firmly. The guard actually laughed. "Mr. Hunt doesn't take walk-ins. You'll need an appointment. Tell him Riley Carter is here. He'll know who I am." "Look, lady, I can't just..." "Tell him I'm the wrong number he's been playing charity games with." Riley planted her hands on the desk. "Tell him I know what he did, and if he doesn't come down here, I'll make a scene that'll have security footage all over social media by tonight." The guard's expression changed. He picked up his phone, spoke quietly into it, and then looked at Riley with new uncertainty. "Someone will be right down." Riley crossed her arms and waited, her heart pounding but her resolve steady. She didn't care how rich or powerful Alexander Hunt was. Nobody got to toy with her life like this. The elevator doors opened and a man stepped out. Riley recognized him from the photos she'd found online, though they didn't do him justice. Alexander Hunt was tall, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair and sharp features. He wore an expensive suit like it was a second skin, and he moved with the confidence of someone who owned everything he touched. But what struck Riley most were his eyes. They weren't cold like she'd expected. They looked surprised, maybe even impressed. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice smooth but cautious. "This is unexpected, you think?" Riley shot back. "You've been manipulating my life, and you didn't expect me to figure it out?" Alexander glanced at the security guard, then back at Riley. "Perhaps we should have this conversation somewhere more private. Would you come up to my office? So you can intimidate me in private? No thanks. We can talk right here." A slight smile crossed Alexander's face, so quick Riley almost missed it. "Fair enough. But I'd rather not discuss your personal business in my lobby. Coffee shop across the street? Neutral ground." Riley hesitated, then nodded. She followed him outside and across the busy street to a small cafe that looked out of place among the corporate towers. They sat in a corner booth, and Riley noticed how Alexander seemed uncomfortable in the casual setting, like he didn't belong there. "You had no right." Riley started before he could speak. I told you those things in confidence, thinking you were my friend, and you used that information to mess with my life. I wasn't trying to mess with anything, Alexander said quietly. I was trying to help. Why? Because you felt sorry for the poor girl who texted you by mistake? Because you wanted to feel like a hero? Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten? Alexander met her eyes steadily. That there are real people struggling behind every statistic. That compassion and determination still exist in this world. You opened up about your life to someone you trusted, and I found that honesty refreshing. So you decided to play God with my problems? I decided to remove some obstacles from your path, Alexander corrected. You're still the one doing the work, Riley. I didn't give you that promotion. Your manager recognized your value. I just made sure the company could afford to pay you what you're worth. Your mother's bills? The hospital has a charity fund. I simply contributed to it. Your landlord? He was offered a legitimate business opportunity that happened to improve his mood. Riley shook her head. You don't get it. I didn't want a handout. I wanted to solve my own problems. And you can't do both? Alexander leaned forward slightly. Pride is valuable, but so is accepting help when it's freely given. I don't want anything from you, Riley. I don't expect gratitude or favors. I just wanted to level a playing field that was tilted against you through no fault of your own. Why? Riley demanded. Why would you care about some random stranger? Alexander was quiet for a moment, and something vulnerable flickered across his face. Because our conversation that night was the most real interaction I'd had in years. Everyone in my life wants something from me. Money, connections, opportunities. But you had no idea who I was, and you were just honest, human. It reminded me what that feels like. Riley wanted to stay angry, but something in his voice made her pause. She studied him carefully and saw past the expensive suit to the loneliness underneath. Maybe he was just as trapped as she was, just in a different kind of cage. I still don't like it, she said finally. I don't like feeling like I owe someone or that my success isn't really mine. Then earn it, Alexander said simply. Work for me. 6 months as my personal assistant. The salary is more than fair, and at the end of it you'll know that everything you have is because you worked for it. No charity, no pity. Just honest work and honest pay. Riley laughed in disbelief. You want me to work for you? I don't know anything about running a business or being someone's assistant. You know how to work hard. You know how to handle difficult people. You know how to manage multiple responsibilities without breaking down. That's more valuable than most business degrees. Alexander pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. Think about it. No pressure, but the offer stands. Riley picked up the card, turning it over in her fingers. It felt heavy, like it carried more weight than just paper and ink. This was insane. She should walk away, tell him to leave her alone, go back to her normal struggling life. But then she thought about her mother's medical bills, now paid. About her promotion and reduced rent. About 6 months of good salary that could change everything for her family. About the chance to prove she could succeed not because of charity, but because of her own abilities. One condition, Riley heard herself say. You never do anything behind my back again. No more secret help, no more pulling strings. If I work for you, I want everything out in the open. Alexander nodded slowly. Agreed. And I want to know why you really responded to my texts that night. The real reason. Alexander looked away, out the cafe window at the busy street. When he spoke, his voice was softer. Because I was alone in my office at midnight, surrounded by everything money can buy, and I was miserable. Your message came through, and for the first time in a long time, I felt needed. Not for my money or my name, just for listening. It felt good to be just a person for a few hours. Does that make sense? Riley found herself nodding. Yeah, it does. They sat in silence for a moment, an understanding passing between them that didn't need words. Okay, Riley said finally. I'll take the job. But I'm keeping my eyes on you, Alexander Hunt. You pull any more strings without telling me, and I walk. Alexander smiled, and it transformed his entire face. He looked younger, more real. Deal. Welcome to Hunt Industries, Riley Carter. Something tells me this is going to be interesting. Riley left the cafe with a job offer in her pocket and a strange feeling in her chest. She had no idea she'd just made the decision that would change her entire life. That this billionaire CEO with his walls and his loneliness would become so much more than just her boss. that in 6 months she'd be facing an impossible choice that would test everything she believed about herself. But that was still to come. For now, she had a new job starting Monday, and she needed to figure out what a personal assistant to a billionaire actually wore to work. 3 months had passed since Riley started working for Alexander, and her life had become something she barely recognized. She wore professional clothes now, nice ones that Alexander insisted the company pay for. She worked in an office with a view of the city, instead of serving coffee to rude customers. She had health insurance and paid time off, and people who called her Miss Carter with respect in their voices. But the biggest change wasn't any of those things. It was Alexander himself. The cold, distant CEO from the business articles didn't exist in real life. Or maybe he did, but not with her. With Riley, Alexander was different. He listened when she talked. He asked her opinion on things and actually considered what she said. He laughed at her jokes, even the bad ones. And slowly, carefully, they'd built something Riley was afraid to name. It wasn't just a working relationship anymore. They stayed late together, ordering takeout and working on presentations. They'd grab coffee in the morning and talk about everything except work. Alexander had started telling her about his childhood, about the parents he'd lost young, about the loneliness of being raised by nannies and boarding schools. Riley shared her dreams of going back to school, of making something of herself beyond survival. The whole office whispered about them. Riley heard the rumors about the boss and his assistant, but she and Alexander never crossed that line. There was something between them, something electric and unspoken, but they both kept their distance. Riley told herself it was professional. Alexander never said why he held back, but she could see it in his eyes sometimes. Want mixed with hesitation. It was a Thursday evening, and they were the last ones in the office again. Alexander was focused on his laptop, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. Riley was supposed to be reviewing contracts, but she kept glancing at him instead. She'd stopped pretending she didn't have feelings for him about a month ago, at least to herself, but she'd never act on them. He was her boss. He was a billionaire. They were from completely different worlds. Her phone rang, breaking the comfortable silence. Riley glanced at the screen and saw it was a number she didn't recognize. Should I answer it? It's after 7. Probably spam, Alexander said without looking up. But something made Riley answer anyway. Hello? Is this Riley Carter? A woman's voice asked. Yes, who's calling? This is Lisa Chen from City General Hospital. We're calling about a situation that requires your immediate attention. Riley's stomach dropped. Is it my mother? Is she okay? No, this isn't about Linda Carter. This is regarding a newborn infant that was registered under your name as the mother. Riley's brain couldn't process those words. I'm sorry, what? A baby girl was born 3 days ago, and you're listed as the mother on all the paperwork. We need you to come to the hospital right away. There must be a mistake. I'm not pregnant. I haven't been pregnant. I've never... Riley's voice was shaking. This doesn't make any sense. Alexander looked up sharply, concern crossing his face. We understand this is confusing, the woman continued. But the infant was registered with your name, date of birth, and social security number. We need you to come in and straighten this out. The police are involved because it appears someone used your identity. Riley felt the room spinning. I'll be right there. She hung up and just stared at her phone, trying to understand what was happening. Riley? Alexander was standing now, coming around his desk. What's wrong? Someone used my identity to have a baby, Riley said. And the words sounded insane even as she said them. At City General. They're saying there's a baby registered under my name, but I couldn't have... Alexander didn't hesitate. Come on. I'll drive you. You don't have to... Riley. He grabbed his jacket and her bag. I'm not letting you deal with this alone. Let's go. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Riley's mind was racing. Her purse had been stolen 2 months ago while she was riding the bus. She'd reported it to the police, canceled her cards, but she hadn't thought about someone using her information for something like this. Who would do that? Why? Alexander kept glancing at her as he drove, his jaw tight. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out. At the hospital, they were directed to the maternity ward. A woman in scrubs met them, introducing herself as Lisa, the one who'd called. She led them to a small office where a police officer was waiting. Miss Carter, the officer said, standing. I'm Officer Rodriguez. We've been trying to piece together what happened here. I don't understand any of this, Riley said, sitting down because her legs felt unsteady. Someone used my identity? It appears so. A young woman came in 3 days ago in labor. She had identification with her, all in your name. Our staff had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. She gave birth to a healthy baby girl, stayed for 24 hours, and then disappeared while the nurses were changing shifts. She just left the baby? Riley felt sick. Unfortunately, yes. We've been trying to locate her, but the address she gave was fake. The phone number doesn't work. We ran the ID she used and discovered it was connected to a theft report you filed. Alexander leaned forward. So someone stole Riley's information and used it to give birth anonymously? That's what we believe. The infant is healthy, currently in our nursery, but we need to sort out the legal situation. Can I see her? Riley asked suddenly. Everyone looked at her in surprise. The baby? Lisa asked. Yes, I need to see her, please. Lisa exchanged a glance with the officer, then nodded. Of course, follow me. They walked through hallways that smelled of antiseptic and floor polish. Riley's heart was pounding. Alexander stayed close beside her, his presence somehow steadying her even though nothing about this situation was steady. The nursery was warm and softly lit. Lisa led them to a small bassinet near the window. This is baby Doe Carter as she's currently registered, 3 days old. Riley looked down into the bassinet and her entire world stopped. The baby was tiny, wrapped in a pink blanket with just her face visible. She had dark hair and perfect little features. Her eyes were closed, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. She looked peaceful, unaware that she'd been abandoned, that her whole life was already complicated before it had barely begun. Oh, Riley whispered, and without thinking, she reached down and gently touched the baby's hand. Tiny fingers reflexively curled around her pinky, and Riley felt something crack open in her chest. She's been very calm, Lisa said softly. Good eater, sleeps well. The nurses have been taking turns caring for her. What happens to her now? Riley asked, unable to look away from the tiny face. Officer Rodriguez spoke carefully. We're trying to locate the biological mother. In the meantime, social services will take custody. Given how overwhelmed the system is right now, she'll likely be placed in temporary foster care until we can sort out the legal situation. How long will that take? Could be weeks. Could be months. The system moves slowly. Riley looked up at Alexander and saw something in his expression she couldn't quite read. He was staring at the baby with an intensity that seemed out of place. I'll take her, Riley heard herself say. Everyone turned to look at her. What? Officer Rodriguez said. Temporarily while you find the real mother. I'll take responsibility for her. Riley's heart was racing, but her voice was steady. She's registered under my name anyway. She shouldn't have to go into the system just because someone used my identity. Miss Carter, that's very compassionate, but caring for a newborn is a serious responsibility. Lisa said gently. Do you have experience with infants? Support? A stable home situation? Riley opened her mouth, then closed it. Her apartment was tiny. She worked long hours. She had no idea how to take care of a baby. This was crazy. She should take back her impulsive offer and let the professionals handle it. But then the baby made a small sound and Riley looked back down at her. This tiny person hadn't asked to be born into such a mess. She hadn't asked to be abandoned. And Riley knew what it felt like to struggle alone, to need help that didn't come. She'll stay with me, Alexander said suddenly. Everyone stared at him now. I have a guest house on my property that's fully furnished. Alexander continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. Riley can stay there with the baby. I'll provide whatever support is needed. Medical care, supplies, anything. And I can vouch for Riley's character and stability. Officer Rodriguez looked skeptical. And you are? Alexander Hunt, I own Hunt Industries. Riley works for me, and I can guarantee she'll provide excellent care for this child. The officer's expression changed. Everyone knew who Alexander Hunt was. Lisa looked between them. You're serious about this? Both of you. Riley met Alexander's eyes. He was offering her a way to do this impossible thing she'd just committed to. He was stepping in to help without hesitation, just like he had that first night over wrong number texts. Yes, Riley said firmly. I'm serious. The next few hours were a whirlwind of paperwork, background checks that Alexander somehow expedited with phone calls and consultations with social workers. The hospital was hesitant but ultimately agreed to release the baby into Riley's temporary custody, especially with Alexander's resources backing her up. As the sun rose on Friday morning, Riley found herself sitting in the passenger seat of Alexander's car with a newborn baby strapped into a brand new car seat in the back. The baby, who Riley had started calling Lily in her mind, though they couldn't officially name her, was sleeping peacefully. "Are we insane?" Riley asked quietly. Alexander glanced at her, then back at the road. "Probably. But I watched you look at that baby, Riley. You weren't going to walk away. And I wasn't going to let you do this alone." "Why?" Riley asked. "Why would you turn your whole life upside down for a baby that isn't even mine?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Because I saw the way you held her, the way you looked at her like she mattered, even though she's a stranger's child. That's who you are, Riley. You care about people. You don't turn away when someone needs help, even when helping them makes your own life harder. That sounds like a recipe for getting taken advantage of, maybe. Or maybe it's the most important thing a person can be." Alexander pulled into a long driveway that led to a house Riley had never seen before. "Welcome to your new temporary home." The guest house was bigger than Riley's entire apartment. It had a bedroom, a bathroom, a small kitchen, and a living room with huge windows. Alexander had already had his staff fill it with everything a baby could need: crib, changing table, bottles, diapers, clothes in multiple sizes. "How did you arrange all this so fast?" Riley asked, overwhelmed. "I made phone calls from the hospital while you were doing paperwork." Alexander set down the car seat gently. "I wanted to make sure you had everything before you got here." Riley looked at this man who'd been a stranger 4 months ago and was now rearranging his entire life to help her care for an abandoned baby. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You're about to find out how exhausting newborns are." Alexander smiled, but there was something deeper in his eyes, something that made Riley's breath catch. They stood there in the quiet guest house, with morning light streaming through the windows and a sleeping baby between them, and Riley realized that everything was about to change again. She was standing at the edge of something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I should let you rest," Alexander said, breaking the moment. "But I'm just in the main house if you need anything. Day or night, Riley. Anything at all." He left before Riley could respond, and she was alone with Lily for the first time. The baby stirred, making a small sound, and Riley carefully lifted her from the car seat. "Well, little one," Riley whispered, looking down at the tiny face. "I don't know what I'm doing, but I promise I'll figure it out. You're safe now. I've got you." Lily's eyes opened, dark and unfocused, and Riley felt that crack in her chest widen. She'd meant to help this baby temporarily, just until they found her real mother. She'd meant to stay detached, professional, helpful but not attached. But as she held Lily close and breathed in that baby smell, Riley realized it was already too late for detachment. She was in love with this tiny stranger, and she was falling even harder for the man who'd helped her make this crazy, beautiful, terrifying decision. She just had no idea how much more complicated everything was about to become. Riley had never been so exhausted in her entire life. She thought working 3 jobs was hard, but caring for Lily was a completely different kind of challenging. The baby woke up every 2 hours, needed constant feeding and changing, and sometimes cried for reasons Riley couldn't figure out. She'd read all the baby books Alexander had ordered, watched countless videos online, but nothing really prepared her for the reality of a newborn. It had been 2 weeks since that surreal night at the hospital, and Riley was running on coffee and determination. She still went to the office, but now she brought Lily with her. Alexander had converted a conference room near his office into a nursery, complete with everything the baby needed. It wasn't standard corporate policy, but Alexander Hunt didn't seem to care much about standard policy these days. The whole situation had changed them both. Riley saw it in the way Alexander rushed through meetings so he could check on Lily, in the way he'd learned to hold her properly, supporting her head like the nurse had shown them, in the way he'd shown up at 3 a.m. last Tuesday when Riley had called him, panicked because Lily wouldn't stop crying and she was sure something was terribly wrong. It turned out to just be gas, but Alexander had stayed anyway, walking the floor with the baby while Riley finally got 2 hours of sleep. "You're staring," Alexander said. Not looking up from his laptop, Riley blinked. She was supposed to be reviewing a contract, but instead she'd been watching Alexander work. They were in his office, Lily sleeping in a portable bassinet between their desks. It was 9 at night and they were the only ones left in the building again. Sorry, I'm just tired. The words are starting to blur together. Alexander closed his laptop and stood up, stretching. Let's call it a night. You need real sleep, not just whatever you're getting between Lily's feeding schedule. I'm fine, Riley insisted, even as she yawned. You're exhausted. Come on, I'll drive you both home. Home. It was funny how the guest house had started to feel like home. Riley had only been there 2 weeks, but she'd put up photos of her mom and her favorite books on the shelf. Alexander had told her to make it her own space, and slowly she had. They gathered everything, which now required 3 bags for a baby who weighed less than 10 pounds. Riley was still amazed at how much stuff such a tiny person needed. As they headed down to the parking garage, Lily started fussing. Hey, sweet girl, Riley murmured, shifting the car seat. We're almost home. In the car, Lily's fussing turned into full crying. By the time they pulled into Alexander's driveway, the baby was screaming, her face red and scrunched up. What's wrong? Alexander asked, concern tight in his voice. I don't know. She ate an hour ago. Her diaper is clean. She doesn't feel too hot or too cold. Riley lifted Lily out of the car seat, trying to soothe her. Sometimes babies just cry, but this felt different. Lily wasn't calming down at all, and Riley felt panic starting to build in her chest. What if something was really wrong? What if she was missing something important? Let me try, Alexander said, reaching for the baby. Riley handed Lily over, and to her surprise, the baby's cries quieted slightly. Alexander held her against his chest, one hand supporting her head, and started walking slowly up and down the driveway. He was humming something, low and soft, and gradually Lily's cries faded to whimpers and then to silence. Riley stood there watching them in the glow of the porch light. Alexander Hunt, billionaire CEO, pacing his driveway at 9:30 at night in his expensive suit, humming a lullaby to a baby that wasn't even his. The sight made Riley's heart do something complicated in her chest. How did you do that? She asked quietly, not wanting to break the spell. I don't know. Maybe she just needed a change of arms. Alexander kept swaying gently. My mother used to hum this song. I didn't even realize I remembered it until just now. Riley moved closer, looking down at Lily's now peaceful face. You're good with her. So are you. I'm barely surviving. I burned toast this morning because I forgot it was in the toaster. I wore 2 different shoes to the office yesterday. I'm a mess. Alexander smiled, still looking at Lily. You're doing an incredible thing, Riley. Taking care of a baby that isn't yours, giving her love and stability while we figure out this situation. That's not a mess. That's heroic. I'm not a hero. I'm just doing what anyone would do. No. Alexander finally looked up at her, and his expression was intense. Most people wouldn't. Most people would have let social services handle it and walked away. But you couldn't do that because you care too much. Because you see people, not problems. They were standing very close now, with Lily sleeping between them. Riley could see the tiredness in Alexander's eyes that matched her own. She could see something else too, something that made her breath catch. Alexander, she started but didn't know how to finish. We should get her inside, he said quietly, breaking the moment, before she wakes up again. They moved into the guest house, and Riley watched as Alexander carefully placed Lily in her crib. He was so gentle, so careful, like the baby was made of glass. When did this happen? When did the cold CEO from the business articles become this man who hummed lullabies and did 3 a.m. diaper changes? Stay, Riley said as Alexander headed for the door. Just for a bit? I could make coffee or tea, or we could just sit. I don't want to be alone right now. Alexander hesitated, and Riley saw him warring with himself. But then he nodded and sat down on the couch. Riley joined him, leaving a careful distance between them, even though her whole body wanted to lean into his warmth. Do you ever think about what happens when we find Lily's real mother? Riley asked quietly. Every day, Alexander admitted. The detective I hired is getting close. He thinks he's found her. Riley's heart dropped. What, when were you going to tell me? I just found out this afternoon. I was waiting for confirmation before I said anything. Alexander ran a hand through his hair. Her name is Sophie. She's 19 years old. She was living on the streets when she got pregnant. Why would she use my identity? Your purse was stolen 2 months ago. Best guess, someone sold your information, and it eventually ended up with Sophie. She was desperate. alone and too afraid to use her real name at the hospital. Riley felt tears building. So she's going to come back for Lily. We're going to have to give her up. Probably. Unless Sophie decides to give her up for adoption, which is possible. She's in a shelter now getting help. But Riley, she's the baby's mother. We always knew this was temporary. I know. Riley wiped at her eyes angrily. I knew that. But it doesn't make it easier. I love her, Alexander. I know I shouldn't have gotten attached, but I did. She's part of my life now. Alexander moved closer, and suddenly his arm was around Riley's shoulders, pulling her against his chest. She let herself lean into him, breathing in his familiar scent of expensive cologne and coffee. I know, he said softly. I love her too. These past 2 weeks, watching you with her, being part of this temporary little family, it's been the happiest I've been in years, and the thought of it ending makes me want to find a way to make it permanent. Riley pulled back to look at him. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between wrong number texts and midnight feedings, I fell in love with you, Riley Carter. I'm saying that I look at you holding Lily and I see the future I never knew I wanted. I'm saying that this isn't just about the baby for me anymore. Riley's heart was racing. You love me? Completely. Terrifyingly. From the moment you stormed into my building demanding answers, if I'm being honest. Alexander cupped her face gently. But I didn't say anything because you work for me. And because I didn't want you to feel pressured, and because I was scared of ruining what we have. You're not ruining anything, Riley whispered. I love you too. I've been fighting it for weeks, telling myself all the reasons it was a bad idea, but I can't fight it anymore. Alexander leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. But Riley didn't want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted the impossible future they could build together. When their lips met, it felt like everything clicked into place. Like all the struggles and the confusion and the fear had been leading to this moment. Riley's hand came up to rest against Alexander's chest, feeling his heartbeat racing as fast as her own. They kissed like people who'd been holding back for too long, like they were making up for lost time and sealing promises they hadn't yet spoken. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Riley felt tears on her cheeks, but she was smiling. What do we do now? She asked. We figure it out, Alexander said firmly. Whatever happens with Lily, whatever happens with Sophie, we figure it out together. I'm not letting you go, Riley, not now. They stayed on that couch for hours, talking about everything they'd been too scared to say before. About the future they wanted to build. About how to handle the situation with Lily. About whether love was enough to bridge the gap between their different worlds. Money doesn't matter, Riley said. I don't care that you're rich and I came from nothing. I care about who you are, not what you have. I know. That's why I love you. Alexander kissed her forehead. You're the only person who's ever seen me, not just my bank account. Lily woke up around midnight and they took care of her together, trading off diaper duty and bottle feeding. It felt domestic and real and perfect, like they were a real family, even though they weren't. Not legally, not yet. Maybe not ever if Sophie wanted her baby back. But for that night, in the quiet of the guest house with a baby between them and love finally spoken out loud, they let themselves pretend that this was forever. 3 days later, the detective called. He'd found Sophie and arranged a meeting. Riley felt sick with nerves as she and Alexander drove to the shelter where the girl was staying. They'd brought Lily with them because Sophie had asked to see her daughter. Sophie was tiny and young, with dark circles under her eyes and a nervousness that broke Riley's heart. She looked like a scared child herself, which Riley supposed she was. 19 was so young, especially to be alone and pregnant. Thank you for coming, Sophie said quietly, her eyes fixed on Lily in Riley's arms. I've been so worried about her. She's perfect, Riley said gently. Healthy and happy. She's a good baby. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. For using your name, for leaving her, for everything. I was just so scared and I didn't know what else to do. Riley sat down next to Sophie, still holding Lily. Tell me what happened. No judgment, I promise, and Sophie did. She told them about her mother dying when she was 17. About having no other family and ending up on the streets. About meeting a guy who seemed nice but left the moment she told him she was pregnant. About being terrified and alone and broke. I got your information from someone who found your wallet after it was stolen, Sophie admitted. I know that was wrong. I just needed a way to make sure the baby got proper medical care. and I couldn't use my real name because I was too ashamed. I thought if I used someone else's identity, the hospital would take care of her, and she'd end up somewhere better than I could give her. Why didn't you just give her up for adoption properly? Alexander asked. Because I was scared they'd put me in jail for being homeless and pregnant, and because up until the moment she was born I thought maybe I could do it. Maybe I could be a good mom. But then I saw her and I realized she deserved so much more than I could give her. Sophie was crying now. I love her so much, but I don't know how to take care of her. I don't have anywhere to live or any money or any idea how to raise a baby. Riley felt her own tears falling. She looked at Alexander and saw the same compassion in his eyes that she felt in her heart. What if we helped you? Riley heard herself say. What if you didn't have to choose between loving her and giving her a good life? Sophie looked up, hope and confusion on her face. What do you mean? Alexander leaned forward. What if we helped you get back on your feet? Found you a safe place to live? Helped you get job training or finish school? Made sure you had everything you needed to be the mother you want to be? Why would you do that? Sophie whispered. Riley looked down at Lily, then back at Sophie. Because I know what it's like to struggle alone. Because this baby deserves her mother if her mother wants to be there for her. And because everyone deserves a second chance. But I used your identity. I lied. I abandoned my baby. You were desperate and scared and alone, Riley said firmly. You made mistakes, but you were trying to do what you thought was best for your daughter. That's not unforgivable. That's human. Sophie broke down completely, and Riley found herself hugging this girl with one arm while holding Lily with the other. Alexander watched them both, and Riley knew they were thinking the same thing. This was the right choice, even if it hurt. Even if it meant giving up Lily. Because love wasn't about keeping what you wanted. It was about doing what was best for the people you cared about, even when it broke your heart. Over the next few weeks, they set Sophie up in a small apartment near the shelter. Alexander arranged for her to start online classes to finish high school and eventually go to college. They connected her with counseling services and parenting classes. And slowly, carefully, Sophie started learning how to be a mother. Riley's heart broke a little more each day as she watched Sophie bond with Lily. But it also healed, because she could see the love there. Sophie wasn't abandoning her daughter. She was fighting to become the person her daughter deserved. I don't know how to thank you both, Sophie said one evening as they all sat in her new apartment. Lily was sleeping in Sophie's arms, and the young mother looked more confident than she had weeks ago. Just love her, Riley said softly. That's all the thanks we need. But later, as Riley and Alexander drove home to an empty guest house for the first time in weeks, Riley couldn't stop crying. I knew she wasn't mine, she sobbed. I knew from the beginning this was temporary. So why does it feel like someone ripped out my heart? Alexander pulled over and held her while she cried. Because you loved her. Because she was part of our life and now she's not. It's okay to grieve that, Riley. I want her back, Riley admitted. Is that selfish? I want to keep her and pretend Sophie doesn't exist. I want to be her mother. That's not selfish. That's love. Alexander kissed her temple. But you're doing the right thing. You're giving Sophie and Lily a chance at a real relationship. That takes incredible strength. They sat in the car for a long time holding each other in the dark, and Riley realized that even though her heart was broken, it was broken in the right way. She'd loved Lily enough to let her go. She'd loved Sophie enough to help her become who she needed to be. And she had Alexander, who'd stood beside her through all of it. Who'd loved her enough to help her do the impossible. That had to be enough, even if some nights it didn't feel like enough at all.